Well, I will be talking about uWSGI, about what can you use or how can uWSGI help you to run, to make your application better. Everybody should know the WSGI interface. It's defined in PEP 333. And it's the main interface between your application and web server. Even if you are using Django, Flask, Base, or whatever framework, look at the interface and try to find out and know how does it work. uWSGI is application server written in C. It allows you to run many languages, Python, Perl, and so on. Python was first module or plugin in uWSGI, and uWSGI also has commercial support. Who is it good for? It doesn't matter if you are dependent on a large framework like Django or use bare WSGI interface. You can use many features of uWSGI. Of course, there are many similar projects, many application servers, but this one just fits my needs. Today we are going to talk about some topics. At the beginning, I had many more topics to talk about, but in the end, I just ended with those. To benefit from tools uWSGI provides, you have to know them, and we will talk about most basic interfaces to your Python app. The first thing is Decorators. I love Decorators. Decorators can save you a lot of time and keep your function clean and so on. The first, or my favorite decorator, is post-fork. When your app has to connect to the database or open socket connection to somewhere else or do something like that, those things don't survive forking, so you have to handle it some other way. When your application server allows you to bind some function call to post-fork, that's the time where it happens after the child is forked. You can reconnect or connect your databases, open sockets, open file descriptors at the right time. Jasně. Je to lepší? Jo, dobře, budu mluvit víc nahlas. OK. Next one is Spool. It gives you option to let your long functions, long call, long operations to offload them and make them work, let's say, somewhere else. And you can give reply to the request and keep the job working. Timer and cron functions marked with timer decorator will be executed periodically on one or all workers you have. Cron decorator is similar, but you can define when you wish the function to be run. Big disadvantages of those decorators are they can be run in the same time, so you have to check manually if it does happen. Signal decorators allow you to bind function call to signals. You can use uWSGI internal signals or system signals just to notify your application that something is happening. There are many other decorators like RPC, which uses uWSGI internal RPC system to call functions. And you can call functions between plugins, between programming languages. So you can call Python function, from example, from PHP. Mules. uWSGI documentation defines mules as mules are worker processes living in the uWSGI stack, but not reachable via socket connection that can be used as a generic subsystem to offload tasks. And that's exactly what they are good for. When you need to keep an open connection to some messaging gateways, run periodically import-export scripts, or periodically check some resource status, Mule is the right choice. You just have a while loop, run it, and you can manage intervals, you can manage everything while you still have uWSGI API to communicate with the rest of your application. Shared memory. I spent many hours getting shared memory working for me until the caching and queue was introduced in newer versions of uWSGI. So use them. The bare shared area is very hard to make working. Queue. Queue is great when you need to use something like Spooler to offload some hard work, but you need more control. You can put messages to queues and let Mule take care of it. You can use, well, this is just a generic queue. You can use it as a multiprocessing queue or something like that. But the difference is uWSGI is handling it. Cache. It's named Cache 2 because there was some, or there still is some other caching system, but that's just caching the result. So this one is called Cache 2. uWSGI caching is awesome. There are some limitations, but when you need just cache some data, it's great. Depending on the use case and the data, you don't have to use memcache or a Redis to cache smaller data. Let's say everything that's fit in the memory you can cache. On the other hand, when you will want to use memcache or a Redis when you want to synchronize between nodes, between servers. uWSGI does provide cache synchronization over UDP, but it's slow and it's same as with the UDP jokes. You might not get it. You can have more than one cache. Caches has to be named. You can even let the key expire after amount of time and so on. It has quite normal caching interface. Async. Async won't solve your performance problem unless you have problems with I/O. With async, you don't have to wait for I/O for a network, and you can do something else while waiting to send the data through network, to write while writing to disk, and so on. You can handle more requests only if your app is I/O dependent. uWSGI has support for Gevent and Tornado as a replacement for its own even loop. uWSGI use chosen or selected async event framework and connects it with the internal event management. So when you know Gevent or you know Tornado, it's just implemented or bound together internally in uWSGI. Maybe you are lucky enough to have someone who can configure uWSGI for you, maybe not. It's always good to know how to configure it yourself. Configuration of each app is dependent on context of your app. Read the documentation and benchmark your changes. Many configuration parameters depends on your application. You can try single interpreted mode, turn on Thunder lock. It may or may not help. Especially the single interpreter time. It depends how the application is written. Put Nginx or other supported web server in front of uWSGI. uWSGI can communicate in binary protocol, which is much easier to parse than plain HTTP, and you can gain some performance there. Running many uWSGIs. When you want to run more uWSGI apps on one server, you will appreciate Emperor mode. uWSGI in Emperor mode will take care of all your apps called vassals. Emperor can manage reloading, number of processing, and many other cases. It also gives you statistics method to know which app work and which does not, or how does it work. My favorite feature is config templating with some magic variables. You can have one robust config file for this machine, for all of your apps, and all your apps installed in this environment can just inherit the basic configuration. Another thing is Legion. Legion, you can use Legion in case you have many instances of the same application. It's just cluster, but uWSGI has these fancy names. So when you bind your instances to Legion, you can by quite easy API call find out which is the master. So when you want to notify users, for example, you want to just know which is master to send those messages. You don't want to every node notify the user. Speed and performance. Many features in a uWSGI can be implemented other way. You can use multi-processing queue with system FIFO to share queue between processes. You can start separate process or cron job instead of mule. uWSGI won't make your app run faster. Better architecture will do. You can use any other caching mechanism, but it always depends on your application or your implementation. When your data fits into memory, serve it from the memory. You can refresh your data periodically, use mules, or set max work lifetime. Again, it depends on your application and how you want to use it. Preparing data for memory storage is quite similar to finding indexes in database. Just look at how you use the data, what is the key to find them. uWSGI with asynchronous enabled can switch context while waiting for next request. So use yields to release the context, and in that case you can handle more requests. Does calling backends has to block your request? I'm sure there are cases where blocking is not necessary. When your service is under load and you have to response, thousands of requests per second. Even writing and logging to disk can make your application slow. Try to find ways how to offload it. The easiest way is to use queue, put the log rows to queue, write a mule, which just loads the rows from the queue, and every 2 seconds writes it to the disk. You can save a lot of I/O, a lot of time. And that's the end. I was quite faster than I thought. So we have more time for questions.
We will definitely. Slido is empty at the moment, so I will ask the crowd. Oh, is there a question? Okay. So can we switch from the presentation to Slido on the screen? Perfect. So it's uWSGI versus Unicorn, hopefully, in case of running Django app. What are uWSGI's strengths and weaknesses in this case?
Well, to be right, I'm not using Unicorn, so but I was expecting questions like that. So I was looking in Unicorn documentation about APIs and about functions it provides. Many functions uWSGI provides is not in Unicorn documentation, but in the other hand, Django has own ways to solve those problems, and by my opinion, it will take many time and many work to combine it and to use those features in so wide and so defined framework to use so sometimes low-level functions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have some more questions from the crowd? Woohoo. Perfect.
Is it possible to run Python 2 and a Python 3 application in the same uWSGI?
Well, I'm running Python 2 only, so I didn't try it, but Python 3 is a separate module or plugin, so yeah, it should be possible, and with the RPC framework you should be able to call functions from Python 2 to Python 3 and back forward.
Okay, is this sufficient? Yeah, perfect. So we have another Slido question. What do you use to manage uWSGI processes? Supervisor, okay. A few typos, it happens. The supervisor. Okay.
Supervisor. Is it from? I'm afraid.
So I will go to the back. Maybe there will be some explanation. Thank you.
It's probably a question about if you are running uWSGI under supervisor daemon.
Supervisor, you mean like a virtual environment, or?
Well, you are probably not running supervisor D because you would probably know that. So.
Well, I'm not sure. Process management in uWSGI is quite complicated. You can use I think that's 5 algorithms to manage processes. Some of them are similar to Apache prefork and so on. And in the Emperor mode, you can let Emperor to handle process counts and preforking and preparing processes for each WASL, respectively for each application. But I'm not sure if it answers your question.
Yeah, well, we have another.
This is my question. Okay. And I would like to ask, are you using some metrics, some performance monitoring data for your uWSGI, something like Prometheus, or something like that, just to measure output and performance of your uWSGI?
Well, we don't measure performance, just throughput, but uWSGI has a statistical interface. You can enable it by stats keyword in configuration, and when you enable it, you can use uWSGI top command, which shows you all the processes you have, requests per second for a total for each process, and in Emperor mode you can see it for all your application, all your processes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Do we have some more questions, or shall we go for a coffee? Okay. So thank you very much, Lukáš. It was really a nice speech. Yeah, thank you. We all thank you.